creation. And the thing about creation is, what if creation is evolution and evolution is creation story in the Bible? Because what was written first? The Bible. And how did they know all that? Discernment. And you don't have to be a scientist to recognize certain things in life. Plants have a certain form of life, different than animals. Animals depend on plants, and plants depend on animals, but plants aren't mobile. They're not, they're life and they're beautiful. I think plants are beautiful because they're life and they're alive, and I think that's the coolest thing. But the story of creation, there were days or periods. Days to God doesn't mean days to man. It never has. And there were periods of life that were just a day to God. And then when God created man, that's when everything got exciting. So if you look at the earth might have been here for a while. Okay, that's fine. Life came in phases. Okay, that's fine. We don't have to hate God because it's popular. Because people want to get away with lying and sleeping around and all these things. But what we can do is just read the creation story for what it is. And that is just a description of life in my mind. And one of the things I think about is when you have Adam and Eve and you have wayfaring years in the Bible, what if Adam is just the first individual man of wayfaring years that knew and had a capacity in his mind for paradise, for life to be lived at the full extent of all joy and happiness that you could possibly have? Adam. And it doesn't require material things to have pure joy. It doesn't. And so Adam, first man, didn't have any material things except for nothing. And he was naked and he found out he needed to wear clothes. And we still wear clothes, but we don't really need to. But it keeps us warm, but we don't have to wear them in the summer. Except for now there's sin. Now there's, that which can degrade our spirit. And it's not appropriate for us that live according to sin to not wear clothes. But for Adam, it was appropriate for him to just be free as a bird. Just fine. And what if Adam was this little man? He's not a little man, but in my fingers he is. And he was just this one moment in life that all of a sudden man decides, you know what? I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal. And Adam begins to do that in whatever way sin was, and the first sin, that's what it was. And what if Adam lasted for one man, and then he lasted for generations until he met the Eve that lasted for generations, and they mixed together. Adam sinned second, Eve sinned first. And what if Eve was the first one to live according to sin? Because she's identified before Adam in our DNA. The oldest figure of relation that all human beings have, everyone that's been tested, is related to Eve and Adam. That's science. Science has identified we're all related to one woman, call her Eve. We're all related to one man, call him Adam. And so Eve eats from the tree of knowledge first. She's the first to live according to sin. Then she introduces it to Adam. Adam, he's been happy, living perfect, not wearing clothes, doing everything he wants to do. Everything is joy. And then all of a sudden, the Eve is like, hey, lie, cheat, and steal. And Adam's like, oh yeah, lie, cheat, and steal, I'll do that. It's a great idea. I know what I'm doing. And he begins to do that. And, so that's my thought. And then I had another thought, is that there's 3 types of people, and Adam and Eve had 3 sons. What if the Bible just figured out how to describe life as we know it. And it's just describing our progression. There's just one element in the Bible that contradicts everything that we know about life, and that's the existence of a man named Jesus. And how this man was perfectly perfect in every way, shape, and form. What? What? But, in creation, you have three sons, and there's three types of people: white people, Asia Minor people, which are the Native Americans and the Mexicans, and black people. You have Seth, Cain, and Abel. And the more I look at the Bible, the more I think of, and especially with the creation story. Because when you begin to look at the Bible through the scope of man's capacity to live according to love, what is love? It's not tangible. We all know what it is because we all have life in us. And we're all born with life in us. We're not born dead. We're born alive. Death comes within your lifetime later on when you mess up at life. And if you live according to the Bible, according to the law of the Ten Commandments, you preserve life. And so why wouldn't you want to just preserve life? And I've called people stupid for not preserving life in the ways that they could and just throwing it away. And that's my mistakes in life, but I've made them. We all make mistakes. Every human makes mistakes. We all know that. We all accept that. So it's fine. It's not a big deal. And when you look at the creation story and you begin to look at, from my experience, and you begin to look at, okay, what if we just live according to the best way to preserve life and have life abundantly? And, you look at the creation story, then there's a God-man in the Old Testament. There's a God figure, not a man, a God figure in the Old Testament that talks to people in their brains. And then the people that are getting talked to are like Isaiah and Abraham and David, and they're like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be an example of life, abundant life to the world, and through prophecy, through, living through God's favor, through obedience to God, and beginning the life of God, life according to God, which I think humanity would be a lot better off if we all lived according to life instead of death. And I think that's what God is us living according to life instead of death. And when you look at, okay, so Jesus Christ, how did that happen? How did that happen? Because you look at his words, you can't argue with a single thing that he says. You think you can, but then when you think about it, you can't. It's impossible. And you either lie to yourself and talk above the heads of others, but you're lying to yourself, or you flat out can't. Either way, you can't do it. And how did this man come to exist? It's amazing that, we have this story of creation which led me to life. I read the book of Genesis in a year. It took me a year to read it because I really tried to think out everything that I was reading, everything that it was saying. And it was a worthwhile endeavor for me because I learned of how to live intelligently according to life, preserving my own life, preserving my own happiness and joy in accordance with interaction with other people. I interact in a good manner with other people, and that produces good fruit, is what the Bible says, but that produces moments of joy that last for a lifetime. And when you look at the creation story and you look at Adam and Eve, I think that you see that the life that we're living is just quite simply the life that we're living, the life that we know as a people. And I just think that I do think it's stupid, and that's a fault of mine. to not live according to preserving your joy and happiness in your life. And if I were around before God, which is impossible, maybe I would have lived according to preserving my life intelligently, and it just been about being intelligent. But God's always been there, and He gave His Son, and He's holding us. He's cradling us. And we're like, oh, we don't need God. We don't need no modern Jesus. God is pretend. God's make-believe. It's just an imaginary friend for adults. And none of that's actually true, is because wisdom, God's not unwise. God's wise. And so you're not just going to say some smart little catchy phrase to say and disprove God's presence in the world. He's aware of our progression. He says, be fruitful and multiply. And there's just so many ways to find wisdom through the creation story. And that's where he says, be fruitful and multiply, is in Genesis. And, alright, I call people stupid sometimes when I lose my temper, and it's not godly, and I don't live according to my creed perfectly, like Jesus did. But I can be forgiven if I go to confession as a Catholic for my sins, because Jesus died for me. And I believe it's not the most intelligent thing to contradict your essence of life in society, thus generating a bad reputation for yourself, creating a mold for you to live in, creating a role for you to play. You're always that guy that did this, and you justify it. You don't need to justify it. It was a mistake. And but yeah, I think creation is just a depiction of the progression of life that humanity knows.